All right, I'm glad you guys are here. I'm really glad to be doing this. Welcome to another episode of Swedenborgian Life. We have a lot of fun things to talk about today. Those topics include, number one, why some people in the afterlife don't realize that they've died. Two, how our five senses translate into the spiritual world. And three, how heaven's light affects our minds. And that sounds like some pretty ambitious content to have answers to. But we're going to try our best, aided by the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg. We're going to dig in there and see what we have to find. My name is Curtis Childs. I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation. And we have with us a special guest today, author Peter Rhodes. Peter, how are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
Good. All right. Peter is a favorite of mine in terms of authors of spiritual content. I want to say it on the air. I really dig the stuff you do. I loved your books and your videos and all that. They've been one of the things that have really stuck with me as a tool that, hey, man, I can use this, and it really gets results. So thank you very much, and thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
All right. So Pete's going to help us, and we are going to read a book called Our Life After Death by Emanuel Swedenborg. You guys can download it and read along. This is a download link. You can type that in if you really want to, or open up the description to this video. It's in there. Grab it, and you can read along with us. However, we got the text side of things right, but I'd like to get the mind right too, because the mind is important. And one way that we can do this is sort of tuning out the hell mindset and tuning in the heaven mindset. Swedenborg's most popular book that this book is an excerpt of was called Heaven and Hell, and really, as he described them, their mindsets in a way. So Pete, let's start by talking about the mindset we can kind of tune out and avoid, which is the hell mindset. What makes up the hell mindset as Swedenborg describes it?
Well, my experience of it is that the hell mindset is those concerns that are directed mainly towards you. You know, how do I look? How do I come across? So there's an anxiety with that. There's a worry with that. There's a contraction in your gut. That sort of thing. We use the word hell. It's an old word. We could call it anxiety or worry or concern or fear. And that headset doesn't express itself very well. It's not intuitive. It's not responsive. It's not very joyful. It's an unpleasant place to be, and that's been my experience of that.
Yeah, and unpleasant for the people around us when we're in that mindset. Some may call it ego these days. So by pushing away those kinds of things and just kind of consciously, when those bubble up, we put them aside. That's how you kind of tune away from the hell. But then there's the other side, which is letting in the positive. You know, letting in what he would call heaven. And what, in your experience, is this heaven mindset?
Well, at first I find that I'm sort of powerless over that negative headspace. And for me, I have to surrender that and ask for help. And the first thing that comes up is that replaces fear is a trust that whoever the creator is, I happen to believe it's God or the Lord or whatever you want to term it, that power that creates my very life is a loving power. It's a power that has wisdom, and that it wishes for good things. So when I surrender my negative concerns of myself and the world, I try to surrender to a power that can take that and do something beneficial for others, and they can do that through me without any concern for myself. So if I'm able to make that transition with the help of what I believe is God, then I can start to move into a responsive place where I'm having a good time.
Yeah, and I find that you get this immediate kind of lightness with dropping all this baggage of like, how are things going to turn out for me? How am I going to look doing this? When you're just thinking sort of about the task at hand. And if we come in with that kind of mindset, we'll actually, Swedenborg says, absorb this information better because we're looking towards usefulness with it. So with that in mind, let's get to the text. All right, we have the PDF, Our Life After Death. We're on page 29 if you guys are reading along there, so you can see it. So I'm telling the truth. And the chapter is entitled, We Leave Nothing Behind Except Our Earthly Body. Repeated experience has proved to me that when we move from the material world into the spiritual, which happens when we die, we take with us everything that pertains to our character except our earthly body. In fact, when we enter the spiritual world, or our life after death, which I just want to point out this little phrase here, our life after death, is where this book got its title from. We are in a body as we were in this world. Since we don't feel or see any difference, it seems as if nothing has changed. Now our body is spiritual, though, which means it has been separated from earthly matter and purified. Furthermore, when anything spiritual touches and sees something spiritual, it is just like something material touching and seeing something material. So when we have become a spirit, none of our senses tell us we are not in the body we inhabited in the world, and therefore we do not realize that we have died. And I want to start, there's a lot in that paragraph that we could go after, but I want to start with that last sentence where he says, therefore we do not realize that we have died. And we titled this show today, Why Some People in the Afterlife Don't Know That They've Died. And the way that Swedenborg talks about it is kind of that not only are there similarities between the next life and this life that would kind of lead somebody into that, but that even the sort of the view of life or the convictions about life that we've adopted are so central to who we are that even people who are shown, oh, you're in another life, if they really have grasped onto, sort of this ego-based kind of mindset that they can return even after seeing amazing things to sort of how they were before. And I was just thinking, Pete, that's kind of how we are in life, isn't it? That even if we experience something like some great compassion or love for someone, pretty quickly we can get stuck in our old ego ruts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been to various workshops, 3-day, 4-day weekend workshops, Thich Nhat Hanh and people like that. And in that space, you get into a sort of elevated way of experiencing life, and you think, this is great. I finally am freed from my concerns of self and fear. And I'm expansive, breathing well, and you think this is going to last forever, and you're very close to the people who are there. And my experience is it doesn't take very long to get back to my natural state of being. And I think God works on our natural state of being, and he makes his progress in a slow manner so that we can feel it's our own progress, whereas we have these environments you can go into, like an ashram or something like that. You can feel a change pretty rapidly, but when you go back to your old environment, you also go back to your old mental and emotional environment as well, I believe.
Yeah, and Swedenborg will often talk about that we bring the life we've made here, we bring it with us, and that the mindsets we have don't just dissipate, and that you're talking about it there, that we can take little vacations, of different kinds while we're on this earth, and we get transported temporarily to a different mindset, but it doesn't stay, because there's this sort of the core that has been cultivated for much longer, and that one of the things we can be doing in the world is trying to kind of shift that mass a little bit in a positive direction. We put in a little effort, and then you slowly, I think I've heard you describe it like you're turning a tanker. It doesn't happen all at once, right?
Right. Yeah, a big ship. You can turn the wheel quite rapidly, but the ship itself takes some time. So we have a lot of momentum going. At least I do. I've had, attitudes from childhood. They've been reinforced. I have opinions and judgments. So when I want to do spiritual work and change my direction, I can do a lot of work. I can do meditation. I can do a lot of reading. I can do a lot of praying. And I believe it does make a change, but I don't feel a rapid change. In the 60s, maybe if I used marijuana or something, I can feel a rapid change. But that's not mine. That's something that's brought into the brain and into the chemical part of you. The real part of change for me has been slow but significant. I find as you start to turn away from self and turn towards what they say, love of God and love of the neighbor, that gradual turn, although gradual, can be very significant in how you experience other people as well as yourself.
And the way that Swedenborg is describing, even the dying experience, which we talked about a few times ago or a few episodes ago, which is very intense, and you're surrounded by angels, and they tell you you're in the next life, and this is how things are, and you have all this love, a lot like people will mention in near-death experiences, that has an impact on you for a while. But if it's not accepted into your life, or if it's contrary to what you've kind of made your life, you will slowly return. And because of, as Swedenborg is describing it, there are similarities in the next life. You can actually get back into a mode of life that's close enough that you don't even remember anymore where you are, and that Swedenborg would often have the bizarre experience of talking to spirits in the afterlife and them telling him, oh, there is no afterlife. We're just living in the world, and him having to remind him, don't you remember when you saw those angels and all that? Not that if you get back to that, you can't from there grow out and realize where you are and what's happening, but it just goes to show that that the mindset is a powerful thing, and the more that we work on it here, the better chance we have of moving forward. All right, and if you're just joining us, or this is your first time watching, we're here chatting about stuff, but we want to hear what you have to say too. So feel free to leave us a question or a comment. You can do it just in the YouTube comment sections there, or if you're on Facebook, leave it there. We'll find it, and we'll, or if you want to share an experience, maybe you've had some kind of out-of-body experience or encounter with the spiritual world, and you've encountered someone who didn't know that they were there. We want to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, we're going to keep going through the text. So let's get back to the PDF here. Okay, so down to the end of 29, as spirit people, that just meaning people, you or I, who have passed into the spiritual world after death, we possess every outer and inner sense we had in the world. We see the way we used to, we hear and talk the way we used to, we smell and taste, we feel it when we are touched just the way we used to, we want, wish, crave, think, ponder, are moved, loved, and intend the way we used to. Studious types still read and write the way they did before. In a word, when we move from the one life into the other, or from one world into the other, it is like moving from one physical place to another. And we take with us everything we possessed as human beings, to the point that it would be untrue to say we have lost anything of our own after death, which is only a death of the earthly body. And he really hammers this point home that he doesn't obviously mean that you take your car with you, or you take your video game collection. Would be nice, but what he's talking about is the things you take with you are the internal things, your personality traits, what makes you you, and that those have the potential to expand and get different there, but they're not gone. Certain parts can be dormant or change, and you can certainly be making progress. But he's saying that what you are, then really, I guess that's why life is like it is. Because why, Pete, would we live, this whole life with all its nuances if what we are doing here didn't have an importance to the next chapter, right?
Well, I think Swedenborg talks about our spirit actually is in the spiritual world. We don't call it another world or somewhere else. It's kingdom of heaven's within you. So most of my life during the day, although I might be driving through the city or I might be on vacation in a paradise type place, most of my life experience is in my feelings and my thoughts and my affections and my emotions. And that's what I'm experiencing most of the time. I can be in a very beautiful place and feel depressed or anxious, and I can be down in the subway in Philadelphia and feel very happy and content. So if I really reflect on my day, it isn't so much physically where I've been and what I've done, what I've seen, but emotionally. So I think when you leave the physical body, you're really very comfortable because that's where you've been spending most of your time anyway. So it just feels very natural to you. I don't spend a whole lot of time paying attention to my physical body as long as it's not in pain and so forth. But I do spend a lot of time experiencing, expressing, and hearing other people express their affections and emotions and thoughts. So I believe that is the spiritual world, is the world of thoughts and affections. And we're already there most of the time, but we just happen to have a five-sensed mechanism that can help us experience this external world. But that's a very thin veneer of who we are and what we experience most of the time.
Yeah, that popular saying comes to mind. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and there is sort of a nativeness to the spiritual world when you get there, because you have been having this sort of dual citizenship experience, and I really agree about that. You can be anywhere and your mind is you've brought, yeah, you're on a vacation on a tropical island, but you packed your mind and brought it along, so you have the power to destroy happiness anywhere that you go. And yes, there are times when you can be in a very mundane place, but you just feel really good, which is really worth noting, because we so often think we gear our lives towards, okay, if only I have these external changes, then I'll be happy, without realizing how much the internal experience sort of trumps the external. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of questions that people have here, and see what they think about the topic. So this is the first one from Mark from YouTube. Do spirits excite the urges, compulsions, and addictive behavior in people because they need a connection to the physical world to enjoy those pleasures after death? So what Mark is referring to here is Swedenborg's idea that, and it's actually very fitting to what we were just talking about, that we are in the spiritual world right now, in a way, that our spirit is there, and that Swedenborg said that, yeah, in the spiritual world, your spirit's there, and it's not in a vacuum. It's in that world, and it's being affected by the other people in that world. And so here, Mark is asking about, where do our urges come from? We get oh, I want to do this, I got to have another of these. Is there a spiritual influence there? And I mean, what comes to mind is I was talking to someone who worked with schizophrenic people, or people with various mental illnesses in a like a correctional facility, and he was learning that a lot of them would report that, yeah, these spirits or voices or whatever would very much prompt things in them. And Swedenborg, now that I'm thinking about it, will write about, he says, oh, I was walking down the street and the spirits with me tried to get me to buy this thing or that thing, that they really, and he was more open to that world than most of us are, but he very much did say that there's a sort of a spiritual influence on things, and that affects things. Pete, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm a recovering person, and I certainly know what addiction is in my own life. And I personally feel, yeah, there are societies of spirits around me that is their love, those addictive behaviors and addictive ways of thinking and being. And I believe they really want to manifest in the external world. That's where they get their greatest delight, if they can do it. But they can't do it directly because they're not in this world. But they can do it through the spirits who also at that time are in this world and have a body. So I think they're really urging you to, it's sort of like someone who is imagining something, imagining a great meal or a beautiful woman or something. The imagination is pretty good, but they really want to have the physical experience. And I think the societies that represent those various addictions want to use man so that they can sort of vicariously experience the man or woman, externalizing it at the lowest level of creation, at the natural physical form. And then there's a certain pleasure they get from doing that. So to me, those urges and desires, they're not created from within me, they're brought to me. I probably am prone to those societies that are my personal addictions. And yeah, I feel they're very much involved in wanting you to participate in that, and then getting some kind of pleasure when you do it, and also giving you their pleasure of that particular behavior. So yeah, I feel very closely related to societies are involved in those kind of urges and those kind of desires and obsessions.
Yeah, and the Swedenborg's one of his primary goals, in sort of spiritual rebirth or regeneration, is to come to realize that things don't necessarily originate in you. That to stop taking ownership of everything. Like, oh, this is my anger, this is my, not to not take responsibility for it, but to say this is flowing through me, but just to make that distinction that, okay, this is something I can accept or reject, does a lot for the ability, at least for me, to kind of differentiate myself from that, and it makes you feel a little bit like, okay, wait, I don't want to be working for these guys. It sort of gives you extra motivation to push harmful things away. So thanks, Mark, for that. All right, let's get to our next question. This is from Ivy. Do we get to recognize those we once lived with when we reunite? And this is from Facebook. And that would be reuniting in the life after death. And I would say, based on a large body of experiences, Swedenborg's included, yes. We did talk last week about how what we look like gradually changes in the afterlife, that your spirit comes to look like an image of who you really are inside. Yet he does talk about people meeting up in the next life, recognizing each other, and Pete, you've probably read near-death experiences and all that, where people say, "I've met my grandmother; she looked young and great," but they still knew it was her. So
Mhm.
it seems to me that yeah, we do get that kind of reuniting. Is that sort of jive with what you've read?
Yeah, I think we do recognize them, although spiritually, I think over time, especially someone who's been in that state for a long period of time, we may not recognize them immediately. But if we had an affection similar to the affections we had when we were on this earth, I think we would recognize them. I've had some, my mother died when I was very young, and I've had a number of times in the dream world. And it seemed there are dreams I have which seem very much an ordinary dream, and there's other dreams that seem a little more than that. And a couple of times I've seen my mother. She's very young. It isn't so much a physical experience, but there was an immediate recognition of not only her, but also a re-experiencing of our relationship in a much improved manner. So I think we recognize each other, but the true qualities we had may gradually be changing over time, and we may be attracted to qualities of other people that we thought were in our friends, and we find our friends are different than we had thought they were on this earth. So this more interior way of experiencing each other, you start to recognize there are things going on with people we may not have known about on earth, and we don't recognize that part of them as it manifests.
Yeah, so kind of the lasting connection in the afterlife has to be, with kind of you share values or share something that's deeper. And I appreciate you sharing that experience with your mom and in dreams, and I always like to hear people's experiences of any kind, and it makes me think of how in dreams, I'm sure everybody watching has this, that you can say, oh yeah, we were at my house. It didn't look like my house, but I knew it was my house. Or yeah, we saw so and so. They didn't look like that you can very much know what you're dealing with in dreams, even if externally it appears differently. I wonder if some of that recognition you were talking about, Peter, was like that. So let's take another question. All right, looks like we got two that are about a similar subject. The first is from SF Will. These are from YouTube. Are there other animals in the spirit world or just humans? And from Autumn Gray, do you believe animals are equally important to God as humans? Obviously, in some ways we have more restraint, but in other ways I believe animals are better than us. Thanks for those questions. So one thing I want to say is the idea of something being more important or less important to God, would sort of seem like God only has so much love and care to go around, and I would say, with the God Swedenborg describes, and the God that I would think would be God, there's an infinite supply of love and wisdom, so everything is being fully attended to as much as it possibly can, and uh, that whole, sometimes animals can be better than us. I do think, like, if a person start hurts somebody or harms someone, it's like, oh, that's a bad person. But if a bear does it, you'd think, oh, it's just being a bear, So, Pete, have you read that in Swedenborg, where he talks about that because we kind of have the choice to do things to intentionally be cruel, whereas animals are just going by instinct or by a more immediate reaction, that we can actually, as Autumn was saying, be worse than animals in a way.
Yeah, I definitely think we can take what God gives us, which is His love, and His love is supposed to go out and make others happy. And we're meant to be experiencing that as our heaven, which we're created for. But if we take that love and turn it towards ourselves, then we have this opposite reaction to other people. Rather than wish to do well to them, we wish to hurt them or protect ourselves by hurting them. And animals, I don't believe, have that. If a lion is eating something, he isn't being cruel, he isn't being vindictive, he's just eating something to support his family. Uh, I've been watching YouTube's one of the favorite YouTubes I watch are the animal ones, where you can see how much affection these animals have, not only for their owners but often for each other. Amazing ones recently about a raccoon taking care of a cat, scratching him, and so forth. And for me, I'm getting to see love in a finite form. The finite form happens to be an animal rather than a human. And I think we are somewhat different than we can reflect. So there's a kind of heaven and a kind of spirituality that we can experience that animals can't. But God is love, and love is life, and animals are alive and expressing those loves. So they certainly are in their heaven. Whether they could be in the same heaven we're talking about, which takes some discernment and understanding and recognition of a sort of a mental state, I'm not sure about that. Don't know.
Yeah, and I recently saw a video of a pig saving a goat. Did you see
Mm-hmm.
that one? There's like a goat is in the water. And yeah, so everybody's kind of like, oh, there's too many cat videos on the internet, but they're all amazing. Like there's this goat who's in the water and he's that's my goat impression. He can't swim. He's not having a good time. And I guess the dude who owns him has a pig around also, and you can hear him talking to the pig. He's like, go out, and this pig just goes out in the water and like pushes the goat over towards the shallow part, gets him out, and then just runs out. It's incredible.
Right.
So animals are cool, is my point there. And also the first question was, are there other animals in the spiritual world? Short answer, yes. Swedenborg describes that world as packed with animals. And of all kinds, and some that we don't even get the pleasure of seeing in this world. All right, so those are a couple questions. If you want your questions or comments to be up, just make them. Put them on the YouTube comments there. We'll get them up. We'll have a couple more times for that before we're done. So let's get back to the PDF. We are in the middle of the paragraph here. And this is Swedenborg talking about what we take with us to the next life. We even take with us our earthly memory, since we retain everything we have heard, seen, read, learned, or thought in the world from the earliest infancy to the very end of life. But since the earthly objects that reside in our memory are beyond our power to retrieve in a world that is spiritual, they become dormant there, the way they do when we are not thinking about them. They can, however, be retrieved when it so pleases the Lord. But I will have more to say soon about the earthly memory and its condition after death. And the way that I see this, and Pete, I'd love to hear if you think of it in the same way, is that here our memory is kind of staying with us the whole time. We're kind of haunted by it. Past events are always popping into the consciousness. It's very hard not to ruminate on them. But there it almost seems like the storage system is better, and you can access memory, but it's not. It doesn't happen involuntary. There's less of going over the past. Does that seem to ring true?
Well, I think for me, a lot of going back into my memory and back into the past and even into the future are personal concerns, so personal sense of presence. And I think when you get in the spiritual world, gradually you're relieved of that personal way of viewing everything. It's all about me, or how does it impact on me, and you're freed from that, so that whatever resources are in your memory or in your mind or in your emotions, they can be utilized if they're needed at that time for a positive reason. But I don't believe we go back anymore just feeling guilty or shame or embarrassed or anything like that. Those things have been made quiescent, and we'll really be free to express good emotions and good loves. But just like going into your workshop, you may not have used Sawzall for many, many years, but if you have a need for it, you can go get it and oil it and use it. And I think when we have a need for a memory, if it serves, then it would be available to us. But since we're in a spiritual world, most of the natural memories aren't going to be used very much. But if there's need for that, then they are available.
Yeah, and I think I'd take that. I've spent a lot of time going over memories, and it's not very productive. Like it never makes me feel like, oh, I'm so glad I thought about that for a couple hours. All right, so we're going to return to the text. If you're just joining us, we're on page 30 of Swedenborg's Our Life After Death. And feel free to leave your questions and comments just in the comment section there, and we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about, and also learn from you. Obviously, I'm not an expert on anything, I feel like, and certainly not the life after death. So I want to hear all kinds of things from you guys. So very much appreciate the questions so far. So let's get back into our PDF. People who are focused on their senses, and I just want to hover over this phrase for a second. Swedenborg often talks about this, and it kind of has a connotation beyond what it sounds like. Sort of superficial might be a good word to describe it. You're focused on external things, and that's kind of where it starts and ends for you. So he brings this up a lot. They're one of the characters, and oh, and sorry, I want to say, Pete, that while you're here, you had kind of, I think I got this idea initially from you, this idea that whenever he's talking about, people who do this, people who do that, really, I mean, and that can exist in any of us, right? It's not just like, there's certain people who are like this.
Yeah, I guess my own personal point of view is, why would Scripture, or why would God through Scriptures or revelation be talking to me about other people? Why would he talk to me about people who are selfless if I'm selfish, or talk to me about selfish people if I'm selfless? I don't believe he wants to gossip, so I believe he's really talking to me about various states within myself, and I'm a microcosm. I have all sorts of states, and any state that exists in the external world in a small way exists in myself. So I can go from being very happy and content, and suddenly I spill something on myself, I can go into anger. So there are parts of me that are totally focused on the senses. So my natural corporeal part of me, which is only part of who I am, I'm also spiritual, I'm also mental, I'm psychological, but the natural body seeks pleasure and avoids pain, and that part of me is incapable of looking at or focusing on spiritual things because it has only natural concerns. But that isn't the totality of who I am or anybody else. So he's really talking to me about states within myself that can't be elevated, so that I don't waste my time trying to elevate my natural mind into spirituality, but I start to turn and find there are also spiritual parts of me that have interest in things other than the interest of my natural corporeal body.
Yeah, and to think of it that way, to think of, okay, these are all states that I could potentially be in or am sometimes. Yeah, if I bump my head on something or I spill something, then and that's it, and that because back to what we were talking about initially with heaven and usefulness, that if we're reading in that way, we're looking at things in ourselves. There's a use to that. We can work on ourselves and do that. If we're just thinking of, oh yeah, look at these people are like this, haha, like that's not helping anything. And interestingly, Swedenborg says that angels don't accuse people. Like they like to put a good interpretation on things. It's actually the negative spirits that love to accuse people of evil and stuff. So anyway, I just felt like that was worth taking a look at, so we kept our mindset good through here. So people who are focused on their senses are quite incapable of believing that our state after death is like this, because they can't conceive of such a thing. Such people can think only on the material level, even about spiritual matters. And if we're thinking about it as a state, like you were just mentioning, that really applies there, because I find that I fluctuate through like times of thinking, oh, this is all very plausible. I do think there's a life after death. It seems to be how. And there are other times I'm like, I don't know if there's anything. Life is pointless. You definitely notice that you go deeper in and you go way out to the periphery in states, and it's just good to kind of differentiate those. Do not sense, that is, anything they do not see with their physical eyes and touch with their hands, they say does not exist, as we read of Thomas in John 20, 25, 27, 29. And so there, Swedenborg is referencing the scripture, and to get into his sort of treatment of the Bible and what he sees in there, and the symbolism is a whole another 1,000 shows that he wrote volumes and volumes after that. But in brief, that there's a symbolism to everything. So the Thomas in there is talking again about these states that we can have or that we can fall into. So let's get back to some questions. I know you guys probably have some thoughts on the whole thing. If any of you want to leave a question or a comment, just do so on YouTube below there, or go to Facebook, wherever you found this video. We'll try to find it and put it up because we love hearing what you have to say. All right, so the first one is from YouTube. Jack, does Swedenborg make a distinction between spirits and angels? Could an angel be confused and think he/she is alive? Thank you very much. My initial thought is no, an angel could not be confused, because the differentiation between spirits and angels is one of mindset. That an angel is a person like you or I who has opened enough that God has brought enlightenment and whatever you want to call it. That this is just a basic, a better grasp of what's really going on with life, and opening up to kindness, everything that makes the mind thrive. So you would think someone who's in the angelic mindset wouldn't be in that sort of obscurity, although he does say that even angels go through seasons like we all do, and they have some times when they're in a dimmer light. So Pete, do you have anything to add to that?
Not much. Sometimes I think angels are so much in the present moment, and what they love and what they believe and what they're doing is one, and that's their very life. So they're not so much wrapped up in time and space. So the very thought, am I living, or am I in the world, or am I in heaven, I think that probably that kind of thinking doesn't occur to them a whole lot, because they're so much in the stream of living. One definition of use is love in action. And we are a form of God's love, a unique form of his affection. And when that's acting, I think often those kind of thoughts aren't taking place because they're one with their love. Whereas earlier on, when I have various concerns of self, that's more apt to happen in my own thinking. Well, how am I doing, and where am I, and have I died, or am I in the present world? I think that part of my mind will have those thoughts, but the higher part, the angelic part, I'm just guessing it probably doesn't have that kind of thinking going on, the kind of thinking that we often involve ourselves in.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of that he says that, yeah, heaven has this component of usefulness to it, and that sort of the the mindset on the one side is, okay, what's going on with me? Where am I? What's happening with me? The other mindset, this sort of angelic one, is how can I help? What can I do here to help? And that would kind of, yeah, let you dwell on those sorts of things less. So anyway, thanks for the comment. Let's get to this is from Rafi or Rafi. This is from YouTube. I have a spirit lover. She doesn't hurt me and helps me grow toward the light. I have other spirits who protect me and my children. I have quite a few times. But how do these things fit into a Swedenborgian worldview? Well, I think that they fit well. I mean, Swedenborg was, up until his 50-somethings, relatively like everyone else, in that he, was just seeing and hearing and experiencing what was going on in the physical world. But then he had this opening of, he called it opening of his spiritual eyes or spiritual senses, and suddenly he was confronted by the constant presence of the spiritual world and of spirits there. So he would be in conversation with spirits. He would be seeing spirits at times, even while going through the normal activities of his daily life. He didn't have to be, meditating or something. It was always present to him. So he was constantly in relationship with spirits, and it sort of sounds like what was being described in this comment here. And Pete, do you have any thoughts on the sort of the closeness of the spiritual and physical world as Swedenborg and others describe it?
Yeah, I think what the questioner had brought up is we are very close to and involved with spirits. And in fact, that's their use. A great deal of their use is to be of help and protection to people who are still in the natural physical world. I'll even take it down. I'm going outside, and suddenly I realize, oh, you forgot to get your towel. You're going swimming. And I just send a thank you to whatever spirit suddenly reminded me to go get the towel. We're surrounded by spirits all the time. Our focus happens to be on the natural, but we're in conversation and being influenced by spirits. That is our thinking and our affectional life. So I certainly think we have friends there, and I don't know about lover. I don't know quite how I experience that, but yeah, I think there's a very intimate relationship, and we're living it every moment. And we have a lot more friends and a lot more influences than just the physical friends or fellowship we have in this earth.
Yeah, man. So that's good. My just knowing that my popularity goes up. I have more friends than I think I do. So I have maybe like three or four total friends or something like that. All right. So do we have another question? Yeah, we're gonna take one more. Death for Us says, when people on YouTube, when people in the afterlife see us in this realm, do we look like ghosts dead to them? Do we freak them out? Which is a fair question because a lot of people get freaked out by them. So the one thing that comes to mind for me is Swedenborg says, as we were talking about earlier in the show, it's just funny to think about like spirits saying, do you think humans really exist? I swear I saw a human this one time. No, you didn't see one. That was just like the light in your cat. No, it was. Anyway, that Swedenborg describes that we're dual citizens, right? Like we have a spirit and a body. And that normally, he says, our spirit is not visible, or that our spirit is in a community with other spirits. So just like you might be in some city here, that your spirit is there with other spirits there, but normally they can't really see you. But he says that when you're deep in thought and your kind of external concerns have gone away, you can become visible there. But you're a little different. That he says. You just kind of walk along deep in thought. You're not really responding. When someone talks to you, you disappear. That's what he says. Pete, do you have any thoughts on the on us appearing to them and what they think of us, etc.?
Yeah, I don't believe they see us with their spiritual eyes, and that's what they have. But I think Swedenborg has said, and I've had my own personal experiences, they can on occasion actually see through another human's eyes and then see humans in the natural plane using someone else's eyes. Like I said, my mother died when I was very young. I've had some experiences of having a feeling that she is looking at me through this other person's eyes, and that's a very strong feeling, and I can't really explain that, but Swedenborg talks about that on occasion that's permitted. I think when they see you in that situation, they actually do see you as a human being because they're seeing through human eyes, even though they're spiritual.
Yeah, and then it's all got to happen through a mechanism that sort of like this world that we live in is so system driven that you can't, like, for us to have this online broadcast, we have to have a lot of machinery that's really precise, and luckily we got it all barely working for today. But so there's a lot of systems. So for that kind of connection to happen, I mean, the systems have to be in place. It can't just be like, okay, here you go, you can see something. So. And I had another thought about that. Swedenborg describes spirits being able to see through his eyes and wanting to tell their loved ones, like, hey, I'm here, I'm okay, and that's I think what a lot of people on the other side want to tell us. That it's all right, it's okay. All right, so let's get back to the text at the bottom of page 30. Nevertheless, the difference between our life in the spiritual world and our life in the material world is considerable, with respect both to our outer senses and the way they affect us, and to our inner senses and the way they affect us. People who are in heaven are far more sensitive mentally. That is, they see and hear and also think more discerningly than when they were in this world. This is because they are seeing in heaven's light, which vastly surpasses the world's light, and they hear by way of a spiritual atmosphere that vastly surpasses the atmosphere of the earth. Now, when he talks about heaven's light, there's this thing that he brings up, correspondences, or that's phenomena in this world all are sort of reflections of a deeper reality in the other world, and we'll be taking a look at that at the end of the show. But so when he talks about heaven's light, that actually is a force that is allowing you to understand in the spiritual world, so that once it's not just like that here what light does for our eyes, because these lights are on in this room, I can see things much more clearly. In heaven, light allows understanding in much clearer way. Is that kind of how you read his thing on heaven's light, Pete?
Yeah, I guess I take it that's what they mean by being enlightened in regard to something. The experience is an aha experience. And often we say, when someone finally expresses something or explains something to us that we've been struggling with, and we finally get it, the synapse is, made, that's when we say, oh, I see. Well, we didn't see physically. We were enlightened. There's a light around the understanding that enlightened what we were struggling with, and we say we see it. So I see the light that he talks about in that way. There's much more clarity to understanding ourselves and others in community than there is when we're all wrapped up in day-to-day concerns of the natural body and natural mind.
Yeah, and that's another sort of way that we're in both worlds at the same time, because the way he's describing it, when you get these realizations, these aha moments, that actually is your spirit receiving sort of this light from the other side. So let's take a look at the end of this paragraph here. The difference this makes to their outer senses is as great as the difference we see in the material world between clear skies and the obscurity of a cloud, or between noonday light and the dimness of evening. And so I think what he's saying here in the difference this makes to their outer senses is that because of the inner light they receive there, the outer way that they experience the spiritual world is a lot sharper and a lot clearer. So the whole thing, you get people saying, oh, it was so much more vivid, more real there. So I heard somebody who had an experience say, like, this world is like a comic book, compared to that one. And so I think it's because of these spiritual senses being so heightened that seems more real. All right, so let's pick it back up here. This is the last paragraph we'll be getting through today. Of course, you guys are welcome to read on or catch up on any past episodes. You don't need us taking you through, but hopefully this is making it fun. And I always find that the more it's discussed, the more it becomes accessible. So that's why I also really appreciate the questions and the comments that you guys have been contributing today, and we'll get to a few more of those before we're done. But let's take a look at the end of this gigantic paragraph that takes up nearly this whole page and some of the page before. Because the light of heaven is divine truth, it enables angels to notice and distinguish between even the smallest things by sight. And just flying by this, but he writes a whole book almost on the light of heaven being divine truth, and that this is part of what God is giving out in the spiritual world, and there's all this power in it and this potential. So there's a whole rabbit hole to go down there, but we'll just speed by it right now. Furthermore, their outer sight corresponds to their inner sight, their understanding. So inner sight and understanding are the same thing. Since for angels each sight flows into the other, and they act as a single faculty. This is why both the outer sight of angels and their inner vision are so sharp. Their hearing corresponds in a similar way to their higher perception, which is a function of both their understanding and their will. So in the tone and words of others, angels pick up the slightest shadings of the speaker's emotion and thought, shadings of emotion in the tone and shadings of thought in the words. And Swedenborg describes that angels can know from one word everything about what kind of person you are, and that there's just this because they have this perception that's so tight, they can get that. So Pete, did you have any final thoughts on this inner and outer sight before we move to our last question segment?
Well, I just repeat, I believe the spiritual world, or the world we're talking about, is the world of thought and affections. And the affections, Swedenborg refers to as the celestial world, and the thoughts, which are forms of affection, he refers to as the spiritual world. And when you're in that world, and that surrounds you, and all of your living is in that world, then when we talk about sight and hearing and all, we're really talking about understanding and affection. So yeah, an angel, when by one word, because they're in the world of thoughts and feelings, by one word, by your tone, they know your affections, and by the word, they know your thoughts. because they are born and raised in that there briar patch. That's where they live. That's what they do. So for us who are in the natural world, we think that's quite something, but for them, that's just their way of not naturally being, but spiritually being.
Yeah, and a skill that you can pick up if you put in the work to take the angelic path, which is the pursuing love for the entire human race. Easy as that sounds. All right, so we got a couple more questions. Let's get to here at the end. Our first one comes from YouTube, Ragged07. I am disabled. Will my friends and family know me for my spirit because I will look different? I had an NDE, and that should be a book, but I was healed. Thank you very much for sharing a little of your experience there. And I would say, yeah, that there would be a recognition because even even in this world, what we really connect to in each other is sort of the essence or the spirit. Even though you can't see it directly, you can kind of pick it up through the body. And I think, Pete, as you and I were talking about um, before, that there's kind of this, we're sort of seeing the affections and emotions of people, so we kind of get a sense of their spirit even through the physical. And I would think that that would translate. Do you think that would be true?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'd be recognized immediately from the affection. I think the physical is the least amount of recognition is based on the physical of a person. I think that's why, blind dates don't work out, because you get to know someone and you no longer even see whether they're physically attractive or non-attractive. It doesn't even occur to you. That's not how you know them. So then someone meets them for the first time, they see them physically and say, well, why do you recommend that person? Well, for qualities that you have to get to know, that you have to get to know their affections, have to get to know their personality and what they love. And when someone knows you in that way, they're going to recognize you regardless of physically what may have happened or may not happen, or disabilities or whatever it is.
Yeah, I had an uncle who recently passed away, but he had some physical challenges, and I don't ever think like, oh, am I gonna recognize him or not? I feel like I'm gonna know right away, and I believe that some people who have reported experiences, they always say the people that they saw in the afterlife looked really healthy and great, but they always knew who they were. So anyway, thank you very much for that question. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Mark on YouTube. A lot of people don't speculate about life after death. Is it better to not form beliefs about the afterlife in case they are wrong? I'd say that yeah, it's not a totally harmless thing to form beliefs about the afterlife, because I'm sure that all of us have people that we feel like are causing problems in the world because of their belief in an afterlife. It's not a benign thing, and you definitely don't want to be adopting beliefs that are causing you to sort of short circuit basic decency in this world. If your afterlife beliefs are causing you to not treat everyone with love and kindness, not work on yourself, and not care about the world, then that could be a problem. As far as Swedenborg describes it, I'd say that the main danger is tenaciously grabbing onto beliefs. If we keep a relatively open mind, obviously, like right now we're doing this show where we're like fumbling around trying to say the right things about stuff, but there are much better teachers in the afterlife, and that everybody has the opportunity to be taught. And it's only if, as we were discussing in the beginning, it's only if you really cling to something that mindset becomes rigid. So I would say, as long as you're cool about it and just keep it pretty relaxed and keep a humility, like I'm willing to be wrong about this, you should be okay. What do you think, Pete?
Well, yeah, I'd say I would like to be able to hold all my beliefs really lightly and not invest myself in them. There's something Swedenborg talks about as pride of one's intelligence. And if I start to fall in love with my own concepts and my own thinking, then I'm not going to be able to be led beyond them. So I want to have some humility in regard to what I believe at the moment, because my beliefs have changed over time. Hopefully they'll continue to change over time. So holding it lightly and being teachable and open to new information and letting go of old information that no longer serves you. I think having that fluidity and subtlety is probably something you keep for eternity. They talk about children in the other world. They're very open and very childlike and very humble.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Swedenborg's quote. It is wisdom to recognize that what we know is next to nothing compared to what we do not know. And that applies even to angels, people who know the most things in the afterlife. They know that, hey man, it's like as he describes it, like a bucket of water compared to the ocean. It's like nothing. And as long as we can kind of keep that. All right, so we're trying to get to as many questions as we can here since we got Pete here and we're on a roll. So let's take another one. From Death for Us again. What does it take for these people in the afterlife to know they are dead? Can we help them somehow? I like that question because I like the idea of helping. And I would say I don't know. I don't know what we can do. I mean, I've certainly heard a lot of people talk about like leading people into the light. I would sort of guess that Swedenborg says that we have spirits around us all the time. So the more that we get our facts straight, and live in integrity, that the less that's gonna help them. As we were talking about in the beginning, Pete, like the less that's gonna have them delving into fantasy and kind of grabbing onto things. That could be a help in some way. But that's all I could really think of for that. Do you have any further thoughts?
Well, I guess I'm taking the question as helping people who have passed to the other life know they're dead. I think, of course, we've been saying they're actually not dead. They're really alive, and they're more alive in a lot of ways than they were in this particular level of consciousness. In dreaming, I know I used to do some lucid dreaming, and it says in Swedenborg says that if man is caused to reflect on something, then they'll recognize that they've passed from one world to the other world, the spiritual world, if they're caused to reflect. If they aren't caused to reflect because God doesn't find that particularly useful, then they won't reflect. And I don't think leading them to realize that they've made that transition is probably very important to them. So I may have misunderstood the question, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, so it could be that they are where they need to be, and yeah, so it's all a combination of mysteries and little tidbits of things we know in here. So I'd say keep going, keep reaching for knowledge and see what you can find out, and because yeah, we do want to be able to be as helpful as possible. Thanks for the question. Let's get to another one. This is from SF Will 3 on YouTube. Do we still have bodily functions in the spiritual world? Urination, defecation, menstruation. Are there treatment plans for the waste? So we're talking about potty, which is, hopefully some kids have stayed up to watch this because we can get some of the youth viewership. So I would say there is everything in the afterlife, but things are a little different. Like things are more meaningful than they are here. Like there is food, as Swedenborg describes it, but that food is like emotional qualities or love and goodness somehow are manifested in it. So I would think that all these bodily functions that here we kind of think of as, okay, we got to get rid of them. There is a place for that because he talks about that this correspondence and that negative things in the afterlife correspond to various kinds of bodily filth here. But as far as how that shakes down, like, is it like, okay, we're here at this angelic conference, can you hold that? I gotta go poop. I don't know if that goes down. And Peter, do you want to take a stab at it?
Well, I have absolutely no idea. I think there is, like you say, going to be something that corresponds to all those things: indigestion, urination. There's going to be a cleansing of your spirit. There's going to be thoughts and ideas that are mainly good, but there's parts of those things that have to be changed and left go of. So I think there'll be something that corresponds to all those things, but they'll be at a spiritual level. It isn't going to be at the natural level because it's not a natural world.
Yeah, yep, and menstruation, like this idea of the cycles and giving birth, and just that he says that in the spiritual world, you don't have babies like you have here, but you give birth to what he calls goods and truths, or ideas and feelings, and that maybe there's some kind of process there where there's something comparable. So the basic message that I get from Swedenborg is that things aren't here for no reason. That we don't deal with them and then not have to deal with it. That they may have an expanded or more pleasant role, but they're there. So there's just yes. Yeah. Did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say, Swedenborg talks about the spiritual world as the world of causes, and the natural world is the world of effects. So even our bodily functions flow through the spiritual world to us. So there is going to be something that corresponds because that's where all causes come from.
Yep. That is good. Okay, we have a lot of good, great questions. We're gonna have to cut it off here with just one more. We'll try to throughout the week get to the rest of you guys just via text answer. And if you're watching this afterwards, feel free to leave a question. We'll try to get it to next week, or we'll talk to you in the comments there. So let's do our last one. This is from Tonya on Facebook. My mother has said often that she wonders if my dad knew that he had passed because he was on meds to put him in a comatose state. I feel like we all know, but that is only a speculation. I appreciate you sharing a little bit of your story there. And yeah, I would think, I mean, medication, can be a really nice thing for someone who's in a lot of pain, but it's a physical thing, and that when we shed the physical, we would be shedding everything, in that, along with things that are clouding our mind from the physical. And that the way Swedenborg described it, it seems that everybody, at least at the initial point of death, knows what's happening. There are angels around them, they're telling them what's going on. It's only after that you can slip back down if that's what's useful for you at the time. But I would certainly think that yeah, um, everybody would have clear, wouldn't be blocked from that kind of understanding or clarity by any circumstances in the physical world. Pete, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I just say any drugs or comatose state is referring to the natural body, the natural mind. And the spiritual mind may be very lucid and very awake and very aware of that transition. Recently, I've had a number of elderly relatives passing, and although they may be in stages of Alzheimer's or so forth, all of a sudden they're talking from an experience they're having, a lot of clarity, but it's in the spiritual world. They're seeing things that I'm not seeing. So the division between the spiritual and natural is, yeah, the natural may be comatose, the natural may be under drugs, but that doesn't mean the spirit is. And the spirit is really where we live and experience life. So it can be very, very alive, very, very lucid, even though their body happens to be there physically doing nothing.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to as terminal lucidity, and that this is a phenomenon that happens where people who are close to death, but have been not operating at full mental capacity suddenly are really with it. And so I think that lines up with what you're saying there. Appreciate it. All right, so as we wrap up here, we've been doing a lot of talking about ideas and thinking. So let's just dip slightly into the other side of things, the sort of emotional, experiential side, in a segment that I call correspondences. And we talked a little bit about what correspondences are this time. Basically, it's that there are representations in external physical phenomenon of these deeper kind of spiritual realities, and that we can actually do an exercise where, if we're observing with our physical eyes the physical phenomenon that corresponds, but thinking of the spiritual meaning behind it, that you can gain insight that way and kind of have a connection between the two worlds. So what we're going to look at today is gardens, and Swedenborg was an avid gardener in his day, and that a garden corresponds to the mind. Swedenborg calls heaven the garden of God, and that because plants have to do with ideas, and so a garden is order of ideas, and that we're kind of through spiritual practice making a garden of the mind. So you at home, we're going to just watch, about 30 or 40 seconds of images of gardens, and if you can be watching the physical images, but thinking of this reality, this deeper reality of the ordered and organized mind that we may see in these external images, sort of an idea of something deeper. And of course, you don't have to look at gardens on the screen on YouTube. You can go find your own garden or one in the area, and just open your mind to the potential of, is this showing me something about the mind? And I find that it's a fun experience. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly have enjoyed having you guys here. If you want to support this show, the Swedenborg Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3. Just open up the description of this video, and you can make a little PayPal donation. That'll help just go to spread this show to other people. Very much appreciated. And Pete, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a joy talking to you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and opinions and thoughts with us. Very much enjoy it. Do you have any sort of closing thoughts on our topic overall for the day?
Well, I just thank you very much for having me here. I guess what interests me in life is to find out where I am in the spiritual world, which means where am I in terms of my feelings and my thoughts. There's neighborhoods there, there's safe neighborhoods and not so safe neighborhoods. And I want to gradually be moving to the nicest areas in my spiritual life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more that we move into nicer and nicer areas in the mind, the more you're going to see the world getting nicer and nicer, and all neighborhoods get kind of pulled up by that, because really all the problems are caused by the human mind in different forms. So it's up to each of us to kind of work on ours and bring it up and up. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back next week, same time. So we hope you'll join us then.